an elephant should sleep more than almost any creature alive. A body that size, 6 tons of muscle, bone, and 10-pound brain burns energy constantly. Every step is effort. Every breath moves mountains of flesh. By every biological rule we know, a creature this large should need rest. Deep rest. Hours and hours of it. And yet, in the wild, elephants sleep less than 2 hours each night. Sometimes less. Sometimes none at all. They've been recorded going 48 hours without measurable sleep, the longest known stretch of any mammal on Earth. They stand through the darkness, half aware, swaying slightly on legs like pillars. They move through moonlight while lions dream. They endure the weight of exhaustion that would collapse any other giant. For a creature with such immense physical needs, this seems impossible. And yet they remember everything. They recognize faces across decades. They navigate landscapes the size of small countries. They maintain complex family bonds, emotional intelligence, even what appears to be grief, all on a fragment of the sleep that humans or dogs or mice or nearly anything else require to simply function. Science still doesn't fully understand it. How does a brain that large, that complex, survive on so little rest? How does memory form without sufficient sleep? How does the body repair itself when there's barely time to stop moving? Tonight, we're going to walk with them. We'll trace their path back through 55 million years of evolution, watching as their ancestors moved from water to land, from forests to grasslands, from resting in safety to wandering through the night. We'll stand beside them as they face down lions, droughts, and the violent history of human greed. We'll follow one matriarch through a single sleepless night, 30 miles of walking, brief moments of standing stillness, and the weight of keeping her family alive. And perhaps we'll discover something about rest itself. Perhaps rest was never meant to be stillness. Perhaps the largest land animal on Earth survives by learning what we're all still learning at 2 a.m. That sometimes peace isn't found in closing your eyes. Sometimes it's found in the quiet act of continuing. This is the story of the giants who never rest. And maybe, in their sleeplessness, they'll show us how to carry our own. Let's begin. Ambient sound fades to gentle evening savanna, soft wind, distant water, the first calls of nightjars. We're standing in the African savanna as the sun touches the horizon. The heat of the day is finally breaking. The air smells like dust and dry grass, and somewhere in the distance, a lilac-breasted roller calls from an acacia tree. This is elephant country. The savannas of East Africa and the forests of Central Africa and the shrublands of Southern Africa. These are the last kingdoms of giants. Botswana's Okavango Delta, Kenya's Amboseli, Tanzania's Serengeti, Zimbabwe's Hwange. And far to the east, in the rainforests of Thailand, Myanmar and Sri Lanka, their smaller cousins, the Asian elephants, walk paths carved over millennia. But tonight, we're here, in the open grasslands where the sky is wider than anywhere else on Earth. The African elephant, Loxodonta africana, is the largest land mammal alive. Males can reach 13 feet at the shoulder and weigh up to 14,000 pounds. Females are smaller, but no less powerful, still massive enough to reshape the landscape with their presence. And they do reshape it. When the sun sets on the savanna, most predators wake. Lions stretch and yawn in the cooling air. Leopards descend from trees, where they've spent the day draped over branches, like living shadows. Hyenas laugh in the distance, their calls echoing across the plains. But elephants don't stop. While the hunters begin their night, elephants continue the same work they've been doing all day, walking, feeding, digging, shaping the world around them. They are what ecologists call a keystone species, a creature so important to its ecosystem that without it, the entire structure would collapse. They knock down trees, opening up dense forests so grasslands can form. They dig for water with their tusks, creating wells that dozens of other species depend on during droughts. They scatter seeds across hundreds of miles, their dung acting as fertilizer for the next generation of plants. Where elephants walk, life follows. But that work never ends. And so, neither do they. Elephants don't walk alone. At the center of every herd is a matriarch, an older female, often in her 50s or 60s, who has survived droughts, migrations, and the dangers that come with being large, slow, and visible in a world full of threats. She leads not through strength, but through memory. She knows where the water is during the dry season. She remembers which paths avoid human settlements. She can sense weather changes days before they arrive, reading the wind and the weight of the air in ways scientists still don't fully understand. Around her walk, her daughters, sisters, cousins, young bulls who haven't yet left to form bachelor herds, and calves, some still nursing, some learning to use their trunks, all of them requiring constant protection. Elephants communicate in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. Low-frequency rumbles that travel through the ground for miles. Infrasound calls below the range of human hearing. Subtle shifts in posture, ear position, trunk gestures, an entire vocabulary of motion. At night, these calls take on a different quality. Softer, more deliberate. As if the herd is checking in with each other in the darkness. Are you there? I'm here. Why don't they rest? It's the question we'll carry through this entire night. Because this isn't just about elephants. It's about the nature of exhaustion itself. For creatures this large, sleep should be a biological necessity. Their bodies are under constant strain. Their brains process staggering amounts of information, spatial memory, social dynamics, environmental threats. And yet they've evolved to function on almost nothing. Researchers have documented elephants in Botswana sleeping an average of 2 hours per night, some nights less. And during those 2 hours they rarely lie down. Standing sleep is the norm, with only occasional deep rest on their sides. True REM sleep, the kind where dreams form and memory consolidates, happens only every 3 to 4 days. It's as if evolution looked at the elephant and said, "You're too large to afford rest. Figure out another way." And they did. Forward with Tanom. Tonight, we're going to discover how. But first, we need to go back. Back through tens of millions of years, to a time when elephants' ancestors were small, aquatic creatures that slept safely in shallow waters. We need to understand how sleeplessness became survival. Ambient sound shifts subtly. The present-day savanna fades slightly, a sense of time stretching backward. But before we step into deep history, let's meet the one we'll walk beside tonight. She stands near a waterhole as twilight deepens into night. Her name doesn't matter. Elephants don't carry names the way we do. But we'll know her by the notch in her left ear, a scar from a long-ago encounter with a thorn tree. And by the way, her family orbits around her like moons around a planet. She is 43 years old, a matriarch, mother to 3, grandmother to 5, and the living memory of this herd. Behind her, a calf, barely 6 months old, splashes in the shallows, learning the mechanics of drinking with a trunk that still doesn't quite obey. Her eldest daughter stands watch nearby, ears swiveling toward every sound. The matriarch dips her trunk into the water, pulls it to her mouth, drinks. She has been awake since before dawn. She will likely be awake until dawn comes again. Around her, the savannah settles into its night rhythm. But she does not settle. She lifts her head, scents the air, and begins to walk. The herd follows. Ambient sound, footsteps in dry grass, the soft rumble of the matriarch's call, the herd moving as one. To understand why elephants barely sleep, we need to go back to a world that no longer exists. 55 million years ago, Africa looked nothing like it does today. There were no savannas, no open grasslands stretching to the horizon. Instead, dense tropical forests covered much of the continent, fed by a climate far warmer and wetter than anything modern elephants have ever known. And in the rivers and swamps of what would one day become Egypt, a small creature was learning to survive. Its name was Mauritherium. It was about the size of a modern pig, maybe 3 feet long, 2 feet tall, weighing perhaps 200 pounds. It had no trunk, no great tusks, just a flexible upper lip and slightly elongated incisor teeth. It spent much of its time in shallow water, feeding on soft aquatic plants. And when it needed to rest, it could. The water protected it from predators. The dense vegetation hid it. Sleep was still a luxury it could afford. This was the ancestor, the beginning of a line that would eventually produce the largest land mammals Earth has ever seen. But evolution doesn't work in straight lines, and the path from Mauritherium to modern elephants is a story written in climate change, competition, and the slow realization that size, enormous, impossible size, might be the only way to survive. By the time we reach the Oligocene epoch, the descendants of Mauritherium had changed dramatically. Paleomastodon, Phyomia, and others, creatures that were beginning to look more recognizably elephant-like. They had developed short trunks. Their tusks had elongated, and most importantly, they had grown. Some now stood 5 to 6 feet at the shoulder. Still nowhere near the size of modern elephants, but large enough that predators began to think twice. Large enough that their sleep patterns began to shift. Larger bodies require more food. More food requires more foraging time. More foraging time leaves less time for rest. And in a world where forests were beginning to open up, where grasslands were starting to appear in patches across Africa and Asia, these early elephants faced a choice. Stay small, stay hidden, sleep safely. Or grow large, stay visible, and accept that rest would become a luxury. They chose size. This is when elephants' ancestors left Africa. The continents were different then. Tectonic shifts had created land bridges between Africa and Eurasia, and the descendants of those early swamp dwellers began to walk. Gomphotherium spread across Europe, Asia, and eventually into North America. The family Proboscidea, meaning those with trunks, began to diversify into dozens of species, each adapting to different environments. Some, like Dinotherium, developed downward curving tusks and thrived in forests. Others, like the early mammoths, began adapting to colder climates as the earth slowly cooled. And through all of this, the pattern held. The larger they grew, the less they slept. Because size brings vulnerability as much as protection. A 5-ton animal can defend itself against most predators, but it also can't hide. It can't climb trees or duck into burrows. And if it lies down for too long, getting back up becomes a monumental task. Standing sleep, the the kind modern elephants practice likely began during this period. A compromise between the need for rest and the reality that lying down for hours is dangerous when you're large enough to be seen from miles away. The climate changed everything. Around 5 to 6 million years ago, Earth's temperature began to drop. Forests shrank. Grasslands expanded across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. The world became drier, more open, more exposed. For elephants, this was both opportunity and crisis. Grasslands meant abundant food, if you could digest it. But grass is harder to process than the soft leaves and fruits of forests. It wears down teeth. It requires longer digestion times. And it grows in places without much cover. The ancestors of modern elephants, Primalephus in Africa, early mammoths in the north, adapted by growing even larger. 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet at the shoulder. And with that size came a new reality. They had to keep moving. Here's where sleeplessness becomes survival. In the dense forests where early elephant ancestors lived, food was relatively abundant year-round. A herd could stay in one area for weeks, even months. They could rest during the heat of the day, sleep for longer stretches. But on the grasslands, food is seasonal, water is scarce, and both move with the rains. Modern elephants in places like Namibia's Etosha National Park or Mali's Gourma region migrate hundreds of miles each year following water sources. Some herds in Botswana walk nearly 300 miles between wet and dry season ranges. These migrations can't stop for sleep. The herd moves through the night because nighttime is cooler and their massive bodies overheat easily. They move because predators, lions, hyenas, wild dogs, target calves, and a moving herd is harder to ambush than a sleeping one. They move because every hour spent resting is an hour not spent feeding, and a 6-ton body needs 300 to 600 pounds of vegetation daily. Evolution didn't eliminate elephants' need for sleep. It just made the cost of sleeping too high. By the time we reached the Pleistocene, elephants had split into the forms we recognize today. In Africa, Loxodonta africana, the African bush elephant, and Loxodonta cyclotis, the African forest elephant. In Asia, Elephas maximus, slightly smaller, adapted to forested regions from India to Southeast Asia. And across the northern hemisphere, the mammoths, Mammuthus primigenius in the Arctic, Mammuthus columbi in North America, some standing 14 feet tall with tusks that curved inward like frozen waves. All of them enormous. All of them facing the same problem. How do you rest when your size makes rest dangerous? They solved it in different ways. Mammoths, living in colder climates with fewer large predators, may have slept more than modern elephants. We'll never know for certain. They're gone now, hunted to extinction by a combination of climate change and human pressure around 10,000 years ago. But modern elephants, African and Asian, evolved in environments where large predators never went away, where droughts could last months, where human populations grew and began competing for the same resources. So they learned to function on fragments, 2 hours here, 30 minutes there. Standing sleep with legs locked, eyes half closed, the brain cycling into a state that's not quite awake, but not fully asleep either. And somehow, impossibly, it works. Here's what makes this truly remarkable. Elephants' brains are massive. An adult elephant brain weighs about 10 to 12 pounds, roughly 3 times the size of a human brain. It has more neurons in the cerebral cortex than any other land animal. The hippocampus, responsible for memory, is exceptionally large. In humans, Sleep deprivation destroys cognitive function within days. Memory fails. Decision-making collapses. The brain, quite literally, begins to eat itself as it desperately tries to clear metabolic waste. But elephants? They function perfectly well on sleep schedules that would hospitalize a human. Researchers believe several adaptations make this possible. First, standing sleep allows micro-rest cycles. Even when elephants appear awake, parts of their brain may be cycling through brief rest periods. Unihemispheric sleep, the ability to rest one half of the brain while the other stays alert, has been observed in some mammals like dolphins and seals, and may occur in elephants as well, though it's still being studied. Second. Their metabolic rate is slower than expected. Larger animals generally have slower metabolisms, meaning their brains may not accumulate waste products as quickly as smaller mammals. This could reduce the urgent need for the cleanup that sleep provides. Third, memory consolidation may work differently. Most mammals require REM sleep to transfer memories from short-term to long-term storage. Elephants only achieve REM sleep every few days when they lie down fully, yet they remember everything. How? We don't know. It's one of the great unsolved mysteries of neuroscience. Fourth, social structure compensates. Elephants live in tight family groups where knowledge is shared. The matriarch remembers the water sources, but she can communicate them to the herd. Young elephants learn by following, not just by individual memory. In this way, the herd itself becomes a distributed memory system. But even with all these adaptations, the cost is real. Elephants in captivity, where food is abundant, predators are absent, and space is limited, sleep 4 to 6 hours per night. Sometimes more. Wild elephants, given the choice, would likely sleep more too. They don't because they can't. Let's be clear, adult elephants have no natural predators. A full-grown African elephant has nothing to fear from lions, leopards, or hyenas. They are simply too large, too strong, too capable of defending themselves. But calves? Calves are vulnerable for years. A newborn elephant weighs around 200 to 300 pounds, large, but not impossibly so for a coordinated pride of lions. They're clumsy. They tire easily. They stay close to their mothers and aunts, but in the chaos of a nighttime attack, they can be separated. Studies in Botswana's Chobe National Park have documented lion prides that specialize in hunting young elephants. These prides have learned to target herds at night, using darkness and the cover of thick vegetation to isolate calves. The defense? Constant vigilance. Adult elephants form protective circles around the young. They take turns standing watch. The matriarch rarely fully sleeps. She may doze standing up, but her ears are always moving, always listening. This is another reason wild elephants sleep so little. The cost of a single mistake, 1 hour of deep, vulnerable sleep, could mean the death of the next generation. So, they don't risk it. The matriarch has been walking for 2 hours now. The herd moves slowly, pausing every few hundred feet to strip bark from a tree or pull up mouthfuls of grass. The night is cool and clear. Above them, the Milky Way stretches across the sky like a river of light. She stops near a small acacia. Her trunk explores the branches, testing for fresh growth. Behind her, the youngest calf stumbles slightly, exhausted from the day's long walk. His mother nudges him gently, and he leans against her leg for a moment. But they don't stop. The matriarch's ears swivel suddenly. something in the distance. A sound too faint for human ears, but clear to her. The low cough of a lion miles away. She rumbles softly, a subsonic call that ripples through the ground. The herd tightens. The young are moved to the center, and they keep walking. She has not slept yet tonight. She will not sleep for hours more. This is normal. Evolution is not about perfection. It's about trade-offs. Elephants traded sleep for size. Size for protection. Protection for the ability to shape entire ecosystems. But every trade-off has a cost. In the wild, elephants live 60 to 70 years. A long life, but perhaps not as long as their biology would allow if they could rest more. Stress hormones from chronic sleep deprivation likely take a toll, though it's difficult to measure in wild populations. Calves born to extremely exhausted mothers sometimes have lower survival rates. Droughts that force even longer migrations push herds to the edge of what's physically sustainable. And in the modern world, where human activity has fragmented habitats and introduced new stressors, artificial light, noise pollution, roads that cut through migration routes, elephants are sleeping even less than they did historically. But they endure, because 55 million years of evolution has taught them how to carry exhaustion like a second skin, how to function in the space between waking and sleeping, how to find rest not in stillness, but in the rhythm of continuing. Ambient sound, footsteps in dry grass, the soft sounds of feeding, a distant lion's roar, the matriarch's low rumble of reassurance. For most of human history, we didn't know how elephants slept. We knew they existed, of course. Ancient civilizations rode them into battle, carved their images into temple walls, hunted them for ivory. But their sleep patterns? That was a mystery hidden in the hours when humans weren't watching. It wasn't until the 20th century, when technology allowed researchers to observe wildlife remotely, continuously, through the full cycle of day and night, that we began to understand just how unusual elephants truly are. And even then, it took decades. Because studying sleep in the wild is remarkably difficult. The first serious studies of elephant behavior came from researchers working in East African national parks in the 1950s and 60s. Scientists like Yane Douglas Hamilton in Tanzania's Lake Manyara National Park and Cynthia Moss in Kenya's Amboseli began following elephant herds on foot and by vehicle, documenting their daily routines. They noticed something strange. Elephants seemed to be active nearly all the time. During the day, they fed, traveled, socialized, bathed. At night, they continued feeding and traveling. Occasionally, researchers would spot an elephant standing motionless for a few minutes, head slightly lowered, appearing to doze. But lying down? True, deep sleep? Rare. So rare that some researchers went weeks without witnessing it. Cynthia Moss, who has studied Amboseli's elephants for over 50 years, once wrote, "I have spent thousands of hours with elephants, and I can count on my hands the number of times I've seen an adult elephant sleeping on its side." This raised an obvious question. If they're not lying down, how much are they actually sleeping? And more importantly, how are they surviving on so little rest? While field researchers watched wild elephants, other scientists turned to captive populations. Zoos provided controlled environments where elephants could be observed 24 hours a day, with video cameras documenting every moment. What they found was revealing. Captive elephants sleep significantly more than their wild counterparts, typically 4 to 6 hours per night, sometimes longer. They lie down more frequently. They appear more relaxed, more willing to enter deep REM sleep. At first, this seemed to contradict what field researchers were seeing. Were wild elephants somehow different? Had captivity changed their biology? No. Captivity had simply removed the pressures. In a zoo, there are no predators. Food is delivered on schedule. Water is always available. Space is limited, so there's nowhere to migrate to. Bye. Captive elephants sleep more because they can afford to. This told researchers something crucial. Wild elephants aren't biologically incapable of sleeping more. They're choosing not to, or rather, their environment is forcing that choice. But to truly understand wild elephant sleep, scientists needed to observe them in their natural habitat, continuously, without disturbing them. And that required technology that didn't exist yet. The breakthrough came in the early 2000s with advances in GPS tracking and accelerometer technology. Researchers realized they could fit elephants with collars that recorded not just location, but movement patterns, activity levels minute by minute, 24 hours a day for months on end. The collars were designed to detect when an elephant was walking, standing still, or lying down. Combined with GPS data showing travel distances and speeds, scientists could create detailed maps of elephant behavior throughout the day and night. Several teams began deploying these collars across Africa and Asia. But the most comprehensive study came from the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, led by sleep researcher Paul Manger and his team. In 2017, they published findings that would rewrite what we thought we knew about mammalian sleep. Manger's team worked in Botswana's Chobe National Park, home to some of Africa's largest remaining elephant populations. They fitted GPS collars with activity trackers to 2 adult female elephants, matriarchs of their respective herds. Then they waited. For 35 days, the collars recorded every movement. What they found was extraordinary. The elephants averaged just 2 hours of sleep per night. Some nights, they slept less than an hour. On several occasions, they went 46 to 48 hours without any measurable sleep at all, the longest recorded sleepless period of any wild mammal. When they did sleep, it was almost always while standing. The collars detected lying down behavior, which researchers interpreted as REM sleep, only once every 3 to 4 days, and only for short periods of 30 minutes to an hour. The elephants were most likely to sleep between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., the coolest and darkest part of the night. But even then, sleep was fragmented, interrupted by periods of movement and feeding. The GPS track showed something else remarkable. On nights when the elephants didn't sleep at all, they were almost always traveling long distances, sometimes 20 to 30 kilometers in a single night. The researchers hypothesized that these were nights when the herd needed to reach distant water sources or escape some perceived threat. Sleep in those moments became optional. Movement was survival. The data also revealed patterns in when elephants chose to lie down for REM sleep. It rarely happened in the same location twice. The elephants seemed to seek out specific spots, usually open areas where they could see approaching threats, or dense thickets where they were hidden. And they never lay down if there were any signs of predators nearby. The collars, equipped with microphones, picked up lion vocalizations on several nights. On every one of those nights, the elephants slept less, sometimes not at all. Vigilance overrode exhaustion. Here's where the science gets truly puzzling. In virtually every other mammal studied, REM sleep is essential for memory consolidation. It's the phase where short-term memories are transferred to long-term storage, where learning is solidified, where the brain integrates new information with existing knowledge. Rats deprived of REM sleep for extended periods lose the ability to navigate mazes they previously mastered. humans suffer severe cognitive impairment. Even dolphins and seals, which practice unihemispheric sleep, still ensure each brain hemisphere gets REM cycles regularly. But elephants? They enter REM sleep once every 3 to 4 days. And yet, they remember everything. Elephants are famous for their memory. They recognize individuals they haven't seen in decades. They navigate to water sources they visited only once, years ago. They remember the locations of family members who died, sometimes returning to the site years later. Researchers like Manja openly admit, we don't know how they do it. Several theories exist. Theory 1, micro-REM during standing sleep. Perhaps elephants experience brief REM-like states while standing that current sensors can't detect. Their brains might be cycling through memory consolidation in fragments, distributed throughout the day and night. Theory 2, memory consolidation happens during waking states. Some recent research suggests that memory processing can occur during quiet wakefulness, not just sleep. Elephants' brains might have evolved to consolidate memories while still partially alert. Theory 3, social memory distribution. Elephants live in such tight family groups that knowledge may be reinforced socially, not just individually. If the matriarch forgets a water source, another herd member might remember. The group's collective memory compensates for individual sleep deprivation. Theory 4, we're measuring the wrong thing. Perhaps the definition of REM sleep based on brainwave patterns in humans and smaller mammals doesn't fully apply to elephant neurology. Their brains might achieve similar functions through different mechanisms. The truth? We don't know yet. It remains one of the great unsolved questions in sleep science. Most elephant sleep research has focused on African elephants, but a smaller body of work exists on Asian elephants, Elephas maximus. Studies conducted in Myanmar's timber camps and Thailand's sanctuaries suggest Asian elephants may sleep slightly more than their African cousins, averaging 3 to 4 hours per night in the wild. Several factors might explain this. Habitat differences. Asian elephants live primarily in forests, where cover is denser and predator encounters may be slightly less frequent. Size differences. Asian elephants are somewhat smaller, males averaging 8 to 10 feet at the shoulder, compared to African elephants 10 to 13 feet. Smaller size might mean slightly lower energetic demands. Human coexistence. Asian elephants have lived alongside dense human populations for thousands of years, often in managed or semi-domesticated contexts. This might have selected for individuals more tolerant of rest in proximity to humans. But even at 3 to 4 hours, Asian elephants still sleep far less than nearly any other mammal their size. The pattern holds across both species. Elephants have pushed the boundaries of how little a complex brain can rest and still function. Most mammals follow a circadian rhythm, an internal biological clock that regulates sleep-wake cycles based on light and darkness. Elephants have circadian rhythms too. Their activity levels do vary between day and night, but their rhythms are far more flexible than most mammals. In areas with high human activity, elephants become more nocturnal, feeding and traveling primarily at night to avoid people. In protected areas with minimal disturbance, they spread activity more evenly across 24 hours. During full moons, elephants sleep even less than usual, taking advantage of the extra light to travel and forage. They seem capable of overriding their circadian rhythms when necessary, another adaptation that allows them to prioritize survival over rest. It's past midnight now. The matriarch has led her herd nearly 8 miles from the waterhole where we first met them. They're moving through a stretch of open grassland, exposed under the moon. She pauses. Her trunk rises, testing the air. Something feels wrong. Not immediate danger, she would trumpet if it were, but something subtle. A shift in the wind bringing an unfamiliar scent, a distant sound that doesn't belong. The youngest calf, exhausted, leans against his mother again. She wraps her trunk gently around him, and for a moment, the herd slows. The matriarch rumbles, low, subsonic, a question rippling through the ground. The others respond. They felt it too. She makes a decision. Keep moving. Don't stop here tonight. Her legs are heavy. She's been awake for nearly 20 hours now, but rest will have to wait. The herd moves on. One often overlooked factor in elephant sleep patterns is thermoregulation. Elephants are massive heat generators. A 6-ton body produces enormous amounts of metabolic heat, and elephants lack the sweat glands that help humans cool down. Instead, they rely on behavioral thermoregulation, bathing, mud wallowing, ear flapping, and seeking shade, and moving at night. Researchers have noted that elephants are significantly more active during cooler nighttime hours, especially in hotter regions. Backwalking generates heat, but it's more tolerable at night when ambient temperatures drop. Lying down to sleep, especially in groups, creates a heat retention problem. Multiple elephants pressed together in sleep would overheat quickly. So, they stand. They space themselves slightly apart. They keep air circulation around their bodies. This isn't the primary reason elephants sleep so little, but it's a contributing factor, another layer of pressure that makes deep, extended rest difficult. Sleep research intersects with another field, elephant cognition studies. Over the past few decades, researchers have documented extraordinary mental capabilities in elephants. Self-awareness. Elephants recognize themselves in mirrors, a trait shared by only a handful of species: humans, great apes, dolphins, magpies. Tool use. Elephants modify branches to swat flies, use sticks to scratch hard-to-reach places, and even plug water holes with chewed bark to prevent evaporation. Empathy and mourning. Elephants care for injured herd members, slow their pace for elders who struggle to keep up, and have been documented visiting the bones of deceased family members years after death. Problem solving. Captive elephants have learned to cooperate to solve puzzles requiring coordinated action, demonstrating understanding of cause and effect. Vocal communication. Elephants have distinct calls for different threats: bees, humans, lions, and can recognize the voices of up to 100 other individuals. All of this cognitive complexity should, theoretically, require significant sleep for maintenance. And yet, the elephant brain endures. In the modern world, elephants face new sleep disruptors that evolution didn't prepare them for. Artificial light from human settlements near wildlife corridors, noise pollution from roads, mining operations, and agriculture. Habitat fragmentation that forces longer migrations with fewer safe resting spots. Studies in human-dominated landscapes show elephants sleeping even less than those in protected areas, sometimes averaging under 90 minutes per night. The long-term effects are difficult to measure, but researchers have noted increased stress hormones, cortisol levels, in elephants living near human activity. Higher calf mortality rates in herds that are constantly disturbed. More frequent human-elephant conflict as exhausted, stressed elephants make riskier decisions, raiding crops, approaching villages. Sleep deprivation doesn't just affect the individual elephant. It ripples through the herd, destabilizing social structures and survival strategies that evolved over millions of years. Behind every study, there are people who spend years, sometimes decades, with elephants. Cynthia Moss has been studying Amboseli's elephants since 1972, over 50 years with the same population. She knows families across multiple generations. She's watched calves grow into matriarchs and watched matriarchs die. Joyce Poole, another pioneering researcher, has documented elephant communication and emotional behavior for over 4 decades. Paul Manger's sleep studies required immense patience, waiting for rare events, analyzing thousands of hours of data, interpreting patterns that emerge over months. These researchers live with the same question we're exploring tonight. How do elephants endure? And in trying to answer it, they've given us something more than data. They've given us empathy. Despite decades of research, enormous gaps remain. We don't know how elephant brains consolidate memory without regular REM sleep. We don't fully understand how their bodies repair cellular damage with so little downtime. We can't yet explain how they maintain emotional regulation under chronic sleep deprivation. We don't know if there are long-term health consequences we haven't measured yet. Science has given us the shape of the mystery, but not yet the solution, and perhaps that's fitting, because elephants exist at the edge of what biology says should be possible. They are walking questions, living contradictions, giants who refuse to rest. And in studying them, we're forced to reconsider our assumptions about what rest even means. Tanul. Ambient sound. The soft beeps and data pings of tracking equipment fade into natural night sounds. Wind, grass, the distant call of a hyena. Long before scientists fitted GPS collars to elephants in Botswana, humans had been watching them. And what we saw shaped our stories. Across Africa, Asia, and even in the ancient Mediterranean where elephants once roamed, these creatures became more than animals. They became symbols, gods, warnings, mirrors of human virtues and failures. The elephant's sleeplessness, its constant vigilance, its refusal to truly rest, became part of its mythology. A creature that never forgets, a creature that never stops, a creature carrying the weight of wisdom and memory without ever setting it down. Tonight, we'll walk through the stories humans have told about elephants. And in those stories, we might find reflections of our own sleepless nights. In Hinduism, one of the most beloved and widely worshipped deities has the head of an elephant. Ganesha, the remover of obstacles, the patron of intellect and wisdom. The god you invoke at the beginning of any new venture, any journey, any moment requiring clarity and strength. The story of how Ganesha received his elephant head varies across texts and regions, but one version goes like this. Parvati, the goddess mother, created a son from clay and breath. She asked him to guard her chamber while she bathed. When Shiva, her husband, tried to enter, the boy refused, following his mother's orders with absolute loyalty. Enraged, Shiva beheaded the boy. When Parvati emerged and saw what had happened, her grief was so vast, it threatened to unmake the world. Shiva, desperate to restore peace, sent his servants to find the first living creature they encountered facing north. They found an elephant. Shiva placed the elephant's head on the boy's shoulders, and Ganesha was born, a fusion of human and elephant, mortality and divinity. But here's what matters for our story. Ganesha is never depicted sleeping. In thousands of years of Hindu art, Ganesha sits, stands, dances, eats sweets, holds sacred texts, but never lies in rest. He is vigilant, always present, always available to those who call on him. The elephant head is not just a marker of wisdom. It's a symbol of endurance without exhaustion, of carrying burdens without complaint, of staying awake while the world sleeps so that obstacles can be cleared before dawn. Ganesha embodies what elephants truly are, guardians who never stop watching. In Southeast Asia, Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, white elephants occupy a unique space in culture and belief. They are not truly white. More accurately, they're elephants with unusually pale skin, pink undertones, light-colored eyes, or specific markings that match traditional criteria. And they are sacred. In Thai and Burmese tradition, white elephants are believed to house the souls of previous rulers or enlightened beings. They cannot be owned by common people. When one is found, it becomes property of the king, and its care is a royal duty. To give someone a white elephant in modern English means to give them a burdensome gift, something expensive to maintain and impossible to refuse. That phrase comes directly from this tradition. Kings would gift white elephants to rivals or troublesome nobles. The recipient couldn't refuse. It was a royal gift, a sacred animal. But they also couldn't put it to work. White elephants couldn't be used for labor or war. They had to be fed, sheltered, honored. And elephants, as we know, don't sleep much. Caring for a wakeful, constantly hungry, sacred elephant that you couldn't use for anything productive. That was economic ruin disguised as honor. But beneath the politics, there's a deeper symbolism. The white elephant represents the burden of the sacred. Enlightenment, wisdom, spiritual duty. These things are beautiful, honored, revered. But they don't rest. They require constant attention. They demand vigilance. The elephant, in its sleeplessness, becomes a metaphor for the spiritual path itself. In many African cultures, elephants are associated with memory, leadership, and the connection between the living and the dead. The elephant's legendary memory isn't just practical, it's spiritual. Among some groups in East Africa, elephants are believed to remember not just places and individuals, but the past itself. They are walking histories, carrying stories in their bones. When an elephant dies, other elephants return to the site. They touch the bones with their trunks. They stand in silence. This behavior has been documented repeatedly by researchers, and it looks, for all the world, like mourning. In some traditions, this is interpreted as elephants communing with ancestors. The bones are not just remains, they're doorways. And the living elephants, sleepless as they are, serve as bridges between worlds. The Maasai people of Kenya and Tanzania have a complex relationship with elephants. Traditionally, elephants are respected but not hunted for food or ritual. They are seen as elders of the land, beings with wisdom that predates human settlement. In Maasai stories, elephants are often depicted as judges or witnesses. They see everything, they remember everything, and they never lie. Their sleeplessness becomes a form of moral vigilance. The elephant is always watching, always remembering, holding the world accountable. Across sub-Saharan Africa, elephants are linked with rain and water. This isn't purely symbolic, it's based on observation. Elephants have an uncanny ability to find water. During droughts, when rivers dry up and waterholes crack, elephants dig. They use their tusks and trunks to excavate underground springs, creating wells that other animals depend on. In some West African traditions, elephants are believed to carry rain with them. Where elephants walk, rain follows. Their movements across the land are seen as rituals that call water from the sky. Scientifically, there's a correlation. Elephants migrate toward water sources before rains arrive, guided by environmental cues humans can't perceive. To people watching, it looks like the elephants bring the rain. But there's a deeper symbolism here too. Water is life. Rain is renewal. And elephants, in their sleepless wandering, become agents of that renewal. They are always moving toward what sustains life. They never stop. And in their motion, they carry hope. Not all elephant mythology is spiritual. Some of it is written in blood and snow. In 218 BCE, the Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca marched an army from Spain into Italy to fight Rome. The journey took them across the Pyrenees and the Alps, mountain ranges that no military force had ever crossed with elephants. Hannibal brought 37 war elephants. These weren't African elephants. They were North African elephants, a subspecies now extinct, slightly smaller than modern African bush elephants. They were trained for battle, carrying soldiers and supplies, serving as living tanks that could break enemy formations. The crossing of the Alps took 15 days. The elephants walked through snow and ice, on narrow mountain paths where a single misstep meant a fatal fall. They walked through freezing nights where rest meant death from hypothermia, and they endured. Most of them didn't survive the journey. By the time Hannibal's army reached Italy, fewer than a dozen elephants remained. But the ones that did survive had done something impossible. They had carried war across mountains that should have stopped them. Roman historians wrote about Hannibal's elephants with awe and terror. To them, these creatures represented something beyond natural, endurance beyond reason, will beyond exhaustion. The myth of Hannibal's elephants has endured for over 2 millennia, and at its heart is the same truth we're exploring tonight. Elephants don't stop, even when stopping would be easier. Even when rest would be justified. They carry impossible weight across impossible terrain because that's what they were built to do. The matriarch has been walking for nearly 12 hours now. The herd has covered almost 15 miles since sunset. Ahead of them, the landscape changes. The open grassland gives way to rocky terrain, scattered with boulders and thorn trees. This is the border of their territory. Beyond it lies another herd's range, but the water source they need is still miles away, and to reach it, they'll have to cross this threshold. She slows. The youngest calf is struggling now. His steps are uneven, his head low. He's only 6 months old. This is the longest walk of his life. His mother tries to nudge him forward, but he stumbles. The matriarch stops. This is a decision. They could rest here, just for an hour. Let the calf sleep. Let the whole herd catch its breath. But the scent she caught hours ago is stronger now. Lions, not far. And in this rocky terrain, with limited visibility, resting is dangerous. She rumbles, low, steady, reassuring. The herd closes ranks around the calf. His mother lifts him gently with her trunk, steadying him. They will not rest here. The matriarch begins walking again, slower now, adjusting her pace to the calf's exhaustion. Behind her, the herd follows. They carry each other forward. In Buddhist tradition, the elephant appears as a symbol of the untrained versus the trained mind. The wild elephant represents the mind before meditation, powerful but chaotic, reactive driven by impulses. The tamed elephant represents the mind after discipline, still powerful, but calm, controlled, steady. Buddha himself is said to have been associated with a white elephant. In one story, his mother, Queen Maya, dreamed of a white elephant entering her womb before his birth, a prophetic vision of the enlightened being she would bring into the world. But here's what's interesting. Even the tamed elephant in Buddhist imagery is never shown sleeping. It stands, it waits, it carries burdens. The point isn't that enlightenment brings rest. The point is that enlightenment brings the ability to endure without suffering. The elephant becomes a metaphor for equanimity, the mental state of calm endurance, of accepting what must be carried without collapsing under the weight. It doesn't sleep because it doesn't need to escape. It has learned to rest while awake. In Western culture, the phrase, "an elephant never forgets," has become shorthand for exceptional memory. It appears in literature, cartoons, political metaphors. It's often used humorously, a gentle joke about holding grudges or remembering embarrassments. But the phrase comes from observation of real behavior. Elephants do remember. They remember migration routes used once a decade. They remember individuals who helped or harmed them. They remember the locations where family members died, returning years later as if paying respects. Western science spent decades trying to explain this. Brain size, hippocampal structure, neural density. But the mythology had already named it. The elephant remembers because forgetting would be a betrayal. In Western interpretation, the sleepless elephant becomes a guardian of the past. It carries history forward. It refuses to let go. And in our own sleepless nights, lying awake at 2 a.m., replaying conversations, remembering what we wish we could forget, we might see ourselves reflected in that mythology. We are all elephants in a way, carrying too much, remembering too much, unable to set it down and rest. During the Middle Ages, elephants appeared in European bestiaries, illustrated books describing real and mythical animals, each with moral lessons attached. Medieval Europeans had limited direct experience with elephants. They knew them primarily from ancient Roman accounts and occasional imported specimens for royal menageries. In bestiaries, elephants were described as virtuous creatures. They mated for life. They were modest, covering themselves with leaves when copulating. They feared mice, a myth but persistent. And they never lay down, because if they did, they couldn't stand back up. That last belief, based on misunderstanding their sleep patterns, became a moral lesson. The elephant represented those who, once fallen into sin, couldn't rise again without divine help. The symbolism is darker than Eastern interpretations. Here, the elephant's sleeplessness isn't endurance, it's vulnerability. A constant state of standing because falling means defeat. And yet, there's truth in that too. For elephants, lying down is vulnerable. Standing is safety. The mythology captures the tension. Rest is necessary, but rest is dangerous. So they balance on the edge, standing through the night, never fully committing to either waking or sleeping. Today, the elephant has become a symbol of something else: fragility. Once, elephants numbered in the tens of millions across Africa and Asia. Now, fewer than 500,000 remain. African elephants, approximately 415,000. Asian elephants, 40,000 to 50,000. The modern mythology around elephants isn't about their strength. It's about their vulnerability in a human-dominated world. They appear on conservation posters, in documentaries, in campaigns to stop ivory trade. The elephant becomes a symbol of what we're losing, and their sleeplessness takes on new meaning. In the 21st century, elephants are kept awake not just by predators and migration, but by human noise, artificial light, habitat destruction. Their vigilance is no longer just evolutionary, it's reactive to us. The sleepless elephant becomes a mirror showing us what we've done. A creature that evolved to endure natural pressures, now struggling under unnatural ones. Every culture that has known elephants has noticed the same thing. They are powerful, yet gentle. They are enormous, yet graceful. They are ancient, yet constantly moving. They carry immense weight, yet never collapse. And they are always, always awake. The mythologies we've built around elephants, whether Hindu, Buddhist, African, Western, all grapple with this paradox. How can something so burdened endure? The answer each culture reaches is slightly different, but the theme is consistent. Endurance is not about strength, it's about acceptance. The elephant endures not because it's invincible, but because it accepts what must be carried. It doesn't fight sleeplessness. It doesn't rage against exhaustion. It simply continues. And in that continuation, there is a kind of peace. Ambient sound, wind through trees, the soft footfalls of the herd, a distant rumble of thunder, rain approaching. The relationship between humans and elephants is older than recorded history. Archaeological evidence suggests early humans and elephants shared landscapes for hundreds of thousands of years. Ancient stone tools have been found alongside elephant remains, showing that our ancestors scavenged elephant carcasses, perhaps even hunted young or injured individuals. But for most of that deep history, humans were small, vulnerable, and few. Elephants were giants we watched from a distance. That changed somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 years ago, when humans began to domesticate elephants, not in the way we domesticated dogs or horses through selective breeding, but through capture and training of wild individuals. In the Indus Valley Civilization, in ancient India and Southeast Asia, elephants became partners in human labor. They cleared forests. They moved massive stones for temples. They carried royalty and armies. And their sleeplessness became useful. An elephant that works during the day and remains alert at night is valuable. A creature that rarely needs rest can accomplish what no human or horse could. But this partnership came with a cost. And the history that followed is a story of exploitation, reverence, and violence intertwined. By 400 BCE, elephants were weapons. The armies of ancient India fielded thousands of war elephants, trained to charge enemy lines, crush soldiers underfoot, and break formations with their sheer mass and psychological impact. Alexander the Great encountered them at the Battle of Hydaspes in 326 BCE, when he faced King Porus of the Paurava kingdom. Porus commanded 200 war elephants. Greek and Macedonian soldiers had never seen anything like them. Horses panicked at the smell. Infantry broke ranks at the sight of these living siege engines bearing down on them. Alexander won the battle, but barely. And he was so impressed by the elephants that he incorporated them into his own army. When Alexander's empire fractured after his death, his successors, the Hellenistic kingdoms of Egypt, Syria, and Greece, all sought elephants for their armies. The Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt even sent expeditions to hunt African elephants along the Red Sea coast, training them for war against rival kingdoms using Asian elephants. But the most famous military use of elephants came from Carthage. Hannibal's crossing of the Alps, which we touched on earlier, was not just a logistical miracle, it was psychological warfare. Rome had never faced war elephants on Italian soil. The sight of them descending from the mountains, surviving cold and starvation that should have killed them, struck terror into Roman hearts. Yet here's the dark truth. War elephants suffered immensely. They were forced into battles they didn't understand, prodded with spikes and chains, driven to exhaustion beyond even their considerable natural endurance. Their sleeplessness, which evolved as a survival mechanism, was exploited. Elephants were marched day and night, given no opportunity to rest even in the brief windows their biology required. Many died not from battle wounds, but from exhaustion, stress, and despair. If war was one form of exploitation, ivory was another, and far more devastating. Humans have coveted elephant tusks for thousands of years. Ivory is unique, dense, smooth, carvable, and naturally white. It was used for jewelry, religious artifacts, piano keys, billiard balls, combs, buttons, objects of beauty and status. In ancient Egypt, ivory was carved into cosmetic containers and furniture inlays. In China and India, intricate ivory sculptures depicted gods and mythological scenes. In medieval Europe, ivory was used for religious reliquaries and chess sets. Each piece required the death of an elephant. For most of history, ivory trade was limited by technology. Elephants were difficult to kill with spears and arrows. They lived in remote areas, and their social structures meant herds would defend wounded members fiercely. But in the 19th century, everything changed. European colonization of Africa brought firearms. Industrial demand for ivory exploded, and organized hunting parties began slaughtering elephants by the thousands. Between 1860 and 1930, an estimated 10 million African elephants were killed for ivory. 10 million. Entire populations were wiped out. Regions that had been elephant strongholds for millennia became empty savannas where the grass grew undisturbed. Hunters targeted the largest elephants, usually the oldest, most experienced matriarchs and bulls, because they had the biggest tusks. This wasn't just killing individuals, it was destroying knowledge. Remember, elephants survive on memory. The matriarch knows where water is during droughts, where safe migration routes lie, which areas to avoid. When you kill the matriarch, you don't just kill one elephant. You orphan an entire herd's understanding of the landscape. Younger elephants, suddenly thrust into leadership, make mistakes. They lead herds into dangerous areas. They can't find water. Calves die. The ivory trade didn't just reduce elephant numbers, it shattered their cultures. By the 1970s and 80s, African elephant populations were in free fall. Industrial-scale poaching, driven by demand in Asia for ivory carvings and status symbols, killed 100,000 elephants per year at its peak. In Kenya's Tsavo National Park, poachers using automatic weapons and helicopters slaughtered entire herds. Rangers found families of elephants dead together, matriarchs, mothers, calves, all killed for the adults' tusks, the calves left to rot. By 1989, African elephant numbers had dropped to approximately 600,000, down from 1.3 million just a decade earlier. Asian elephants, already reduced to isolated populations by habitat loss, numbered fewer than 50,000. The species was approaching a point of no return. That year, the international community acted. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, banned the international ivory trade. Countries across Africa and Asia enacted stricter anti-poaching laws. Conservation organizations poured resources into protecting remaining populations. It worked. Slowly, painfully, elephant numbers began to stabilize. But the damage was done. Elephants today carry the trauma of the 20th century in their behavior. Herds in areas with recent poaching history are more aggressive toward humans. They're more vigilant, more stressed, sleep even less. Researchers studying elephants in Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo have documented something they call post-traumatic stress disorder in elephants. Herds that witnessed family members being killed show symptoms: hypervigilance, abnormal aggression, disrupted social structures. Young males, orphaned by poaching and raised without elder guidance, form rogue groups and attack villages, behavior almost never seen in stable elephant populations. The sleeplessness we see in modern elephants isn't just evolutionary. It's historical. The storm is coming. The matriarch can feel it in the pressure of the air, in the way the wind shifts and carries the scent of rain from miles away. They've been walking for 14 hours now. The youngest calf is barely moving, his legs trembling with exhaustion. His mother walks beside him, her trunk supporting him every few steps. And then the matriarch hears it, behind them, not far. The low, soaring cough of a lion, then another, a pride. She stops. The herd freezes. In the darkness, she can't see them, but she doesn't need to. The scent is unmistakable. Multiple lions moving in their direction, likely tracking the herd's scent. Her mind calculates. The calf can't run. The rocky terrain limits mobility. The storm will erase their scent trail, but it's not here yet. She makes a decision. A low rumble, subsonic, rippling through the ground. The herd responds instantly. They form a circle, adults facing outward, calves in the center. The youngest calf is lifted by his mother and another aunt, supported between them. The matriarch stands at the front, ears spread wide, trunk raised. She is exhausted. Every muscle aches. Her eyes burn with the need for sleep. But she's the wall between her family and the dark. The lions circle. She can hear them in the rocks, testing the perimeter, looking for weakness. She trumpets, loud, sharp, a challenge. The other adults echo her. The sound fills the night, and the lions hesitate. Minutes pass. The standoff holds. Then thunder rumbles overhead. The first drops of rain begin to fall. The lion's scent will wash away. The ground will become harder to track across. After what feels like hours but is likely only minutes, the matriarch hears them leave. Padding away into the darkness, seeking easier prey. She waits, tests the air, listens. Nothing. Slowly, the circle dissolves. The herd regroups. The calf stands on his own legs again, shaking but alive. The matriarch rumbles softer now. Relief. They begin walking again. Through the rain. Toward water. Toward safety. She has not slept in 20 hours. She will not sleep for hours more. But her family is alive. Today, the relationship between humans and elephants is defined by one word: conflict. As human populations expand, we've built farms, roads, and villages in places that were once elephant migration corridors. Elephants, following routes their ancestors walked for thousands of years, find crops instead of wild vegetation. And a hungry elephant doesn't care about property lines. A single elephant can destroy a farmer's entire season's work in one night. In countries like Kenya, India, and Sri Lanka, human-elephant conflict is a daily reality. Farmers lose crops, elephants are killed in retaliation. Sometimes humans are killed when elephants defend themselves or their young. It's a tragedy with no easy solutions. Electric fences help, but they're expensive and require maintenance. Beehive fences, using elephants' natural fear of bees, work in some areas. Compensation programs pay farmers for crop damage, but they're often underfunded. The challenge is that elephants need space. A single herd's range can cover hundreds of square miles. They need migration corridors between wet and dry season habitats. They need forests and grasslands that aren't fragmented by human development. And they need night. Studies show that elephants in areas with high human activity become more nocturnal, doing most of their traveling and feeding at night to avoid people. But this disrupts their natural patterns. They sleep even less. Stress hormones increase. Calves born to chronically stressed mothers have lower survival rates. The elephants are adapting, but the cost is mounting. Despite the challenges, there are reasons for hope. In Amboseli, Kenya, the elephant population has grown from around 650 in the 1980s to over 1,600 today. In Botswana's Okavango Delta, strict anti-poaching measures have created one of Africa's largest remaining elephant populations, over 130,000 individuals. In Thailand, organizations like Elephant Nature Park rescue elephants from tourism and logging industries, providing sanctuaries where they can live in conditions closer to natural. In India, the Elephant Corridor Project works to protect migration routes, ensuring herds can move between fragmented habitats without encountering human settlements. And across Africa and Asia, local communities are increasingly involved in conservation, recognizing that elephants bring tourism revenue and ecological benefits. But every success story is fragile. Poaching still kills 20,000 to 30,000 African elephants each year for ivory. Climate change is making droughts more severe and more frequent. Human populations continue to grow, requiring more land. The question isn't whether elephants can survive. It's whether we'll let them. Throughout history, humans have used elephants as tools, symbols, and resources. We've made them carry our wars, our wealth, our ambitions. We've hunted them to the edge of extinction and then, at the last moment, tried to save them. But if we're willing to listen, elephants can teach us something we desperately need to learn. How to endure, not through force, not through conquest, but through adaptation, memory, and the willingness to keep moving, even when rest seems impossible. Elephants have survived ice ages, climate shifts, predators, and human violence. They've done it not by becoming invincible, but by becoming resilient. They carry the weight of their history, both evolutionary and personal, and they continue. Not because they're strong enough to bear it without cost, but because they've learned that continuing is the only way forward. If elephants have taught us anything, it's that we are capable of both great harm and great care. The same species that slaughtered 10 million elephants for ivory is also the species working to save the last 500,000. The question now is, which version of ourselves do we choose? Elephants don't ask for much. They ask for space, for water, for migration corridors, for nights without gunfire or artificial light. They ask for the right to be sleepless on their own terms, not because we've made rest impossible. And if we can give them that, if we can make room for giants who refuse to stop, we might learn something about how to live with our own exhaustion, how to carry what we must without collapsing, how to endure without losing what makes us gentle. Ambient sound, rain falling steadily now, soaking the savannah, the herd's footsteps softer in the wet earth, distant thunder rolling away. The rain has washed the world clean. The matriarch leads her herd through the pre-dawn darkness, and for the first time in hours, the tension in her shoulders eases slightly. Behind her, the calf walks steadier now. The rain has cooled him. The danger has passed. And though he's still exhausted, there's water ahead. She can smell it. They crest a small rise, and there it is, a waterhole, dark and still under the fading stars. The herd quickens its pace. When they reach the water's edge, the calf doesn't wait for permission. He rushes forward, splashing into the shallows, drinking desperately. The other calves follow. Then the adults. The matriarch stands at the edge for a moment, watching. Her family is safe. They have water. The lions are gone. The storm has passed. She steps forward, lowers her trunk into the cool water, and drinks. It's been nearly 22 hours since she slept, but she's done it. They've survived the night. There's a moment after the herd has drunk its fill where the matriarch does something unusual. She lies down, not fully, not into the deep, vulnerable REM sleep that happens so rarely. But she lowers herself to her knees, then shifts her weight to one side, half reclining in the mud near the water's edge. It's a compromise. A brief surrender to exhaustion. Around her, the other adults form a loose perimeter. They don't lie down. Someone must always watch. Her eldest daughter stands closest, ears rotating, scanning for threats. This is how elephant herds survive. They take turns carrying the burden of vigilance. The matriarch can rest for 10, maybe 15 minutes, because others are awake. And later, she'll stand watch while they rest. It's not much, it's not enough, but it's what they have. If scientists were watching this moment through night vision cameras or monitoring GPS collars, here's what the data would show. Activity level drops to near zero. After hours of constant movement, the matriarch's accelerometer would finally register stillness. Heart rate slows slightly, not to sleep levels, but to a resting state that allows minimal recovery. The herd's spatial arrangement tightens. When elephants feel safe enough to rest, they cluster closer together. When they feel threatened, they spread out to watch multiple angles. Vocalizations change. The low rumbles become softer, less frequent. Researchers call these contact calls, gentle check-ins that say, "I'm here," without requiring full alertness. This data would be recorded, analyzed, compared against thousands of other elephant nights. And it would show what we've been exploring all along. Elephants exist in a constant state of negotiation between the need for rest and the demands of survival. They're not choosing to be sleepless heroes. They're just doing what they must. While the matriarch rests, the youngest calf, the one who struggled through the night, plays. It seems impossible. He was stumbling with exhaustion just an hour ago. But now, in the shallow water, he splashes his older siblings. He practices using his trunk to spray water. He chases a dragonfly that skims the surface. Calves recover faster than adults. Their bodies are still growing, still flexible in ways that mature elephants are not. But more than that, calves live in the moment. He doesn't remember the terror of the lions circling. He doesn't carry the weight of knowing how close they came to disaster. That's the matriarch's burden. The calf just knows there's water, his mother is near, and the world is safe again. This is part of why elephant herds work. The matriarch carries the memory and the worry. The calves carry the joy and the resilience. And somehow, together, they balance each other. Dawn is breaking. The sky shifts from black to deep purple to pale gold. The first birds begin to call. The world is waking, but the matriarch has barely slept. She rises slowly from her brief rest. Her joints ache. Her eyes are heavy. But the day is here, and there's work to do. The herd will need to feed. They'll need to move to better grazing areas as the sun rises and the heat returns. By midday, they'll seek shade. By evening, they'll begin another long walk. This is her life. Has been for 43 years. Will be until the day she can no longer stand. But as she watches the youngest calf splash in the water, as she sees her daughter standing watch with the same steady patience she once learned from her own mother, something settles in her chest. Not satisfaction, not pride exactly, just continuation. They made it through another night. They'll make it through another, and another after that, until they can't. But that's tomorrow's worry. Right now, there's water, there's family, and the sun is rising. She lifts her trunk and rumbles, low, gentle, a morning greeting to the world. The herd responds, and they begin to move again. If we step back and look at the last 24 hours through the lens of what we've learned, evolutionarily, this night is no different from thousands of others over millions of years. The matriarch's sleeplessness is encoded in her DNA, an adaptation that kept her ancestors alive when predators hunted and food was scarce. Scientifically, her brain has functioned on minimal sleep, consolidating memories in ways we still don't understand, processing complex social and environmental information despite exhaustion. Mythologically, she has embodied every story humans have told about elephants: the vigilant guardian, the memory keeper, the one who carries impossible weight without breaking. Historically, she has survived in a world where humans have made survival harder, where her great-grandmother's generation was decimated by ivory hunters, where her own sleep is disrupted by the noise and light of distant villages. Emotionally, she has done what mothers, leaders, and survivors do: put her family's needs before her own, stayed awake so others could rest, carried fear and exhaustion without showing it. This one night contains everything. What we've witnessed tonight is not exceptional. Across Africa and Asia, thousands of elephant matriarchs are doing exactly this right now. In Etosha National Park, Namibia, a herd walks through the dark toward a salt pan, the matriarch guiding them along a route her grandmother taught her. In Chobe National Park, Botswana, another family stands in a protective circle around newborn twins, rare, precious, vulnerable, while lions prowl the perimeter. In Kruger National Park, South Africa, an old bull elephant, solitary and scarred, feeds through the night, his massive tusks swaying as he strips bark from a baobab tree. In Minaria National Park, Sri Lanka, a young matriarch leads her first migration, nervous and inexperienced, relying on the older females in the group to guide her. In Myanmar's forests, a logging elephant, freed from captivity, released to a sanctuary, relearns how to sleep on her own terms, no longer forced awake by chains and commands. Each of them sleepless. Each of them enduring. each of them carrying weight that should break them, but doesn't. At the beginning of tonight's journey, we asked, why don't elephants rest? Now, after walking with them through evolution, science, mythology, history, and one long night, we have an answer. Not a single answer, but a constellation of answers. They don't rest because size made rest dangerous. They don't rest because predators target the vulnerable. They don't rest because migration demands motion. They don't rest because heat makes daytime sleep impossible. They don't rest because memory is more important than dreams. They don't rest because someone must always watch. But perhaps the truest answer is this. Elephants don't rest because rest, in the way we define it, was never the point. They have learned a different kind of peace. Not the peace of stillness, but the peace of rhythm. Not the peace of closed eyes, but the peace of knowing what must be carried and accepting it. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of remembering and continuing anyway. If you're reading this at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, mind racing, exhausted but awake, perhaps the lesson isn't that you need to be more like an elephant. Perhaps it's that you already are. You're carrying weight, remembering too much, standing vigil over things that matter. And maybe that's not a failure of rest. Maybe that's just being alive in a world that asks us to carry impossible things. The elephant doesn't solve sleeplessness. It just shows us that sleeplessness can be survived, that you can be exhausted and still gentle, that you can carry memory without being crushed by it, that you can walk through the dark and still find water at dawn. Morbots. Ambient sound, morning birdsong beginning, the soft sounds of the herd feeding on fresh grass, the matriarch's steady breathing, footsteps moving forward into the new day. Let's speak plainly about where elephants stand in 2025. Satas, African elephants. Approximately 415,000 individuals remain across 37 countries. This sounds like a significant number until you realize that in 1930, there were an estimated 5 to 10 million. In 1979, there were 1.3 million. The decline has slowed, but it hasn't stopped. Asian elephants, between 40,000 and 50,000 individuals, scattered across 13 countries from India to Indonesia. Half of them live in India. The rest are fragmented into isolated populations, many with fewer than 100 individuals, too small for long-term genetic viability. The numbers tell a story of contraction, of range collapse, of a species that once shaped continents now clinging to shrinking patches of protected land. But numbers don't tell the full story. Modern elephants face threats their ancestors never encountered. Artificial light pollution has spread across Africa and Asia as human settlements expand. Roads with streetlights cut through migration corridors. Agricultural areas use bright lights to deter crop-raiding elephants. This disrupts their natural activity patterns. Elephants are crepuscular, most active at dawn and dusk, but they've adapted to use darkness for safety. When darkness disappears, so does their sense of when it's safe to move. Studies in India show elephants near villages with heavy lighting sleep 30% less than those in darker areas. Noise pollution creates constant stress. Highway traffic, mining operations, agricultural machinery, sounds that never existed in the evolutionary environment elephants adapted to. Research in Kenya found that elephants living within 5 kilometers of major roads showed elevated cortisol levels and reduced reproductive success. The noise isn't just annoying, it masks the infrasound communication elephants use to coordinate across distances. Family groups lose contact. Mating signals don't reach potential partners. Warning calls about danger go unheard. Habitat fragmentation has turned elephant ranges into islands. Fences, roads, farms, and cities have cut ancient migration routes. Elephants that once moved freely across hundreds of miles now find themselves trapped in pockets of land too small to sustain them year-round. In southern India, genetic studies show elephant populations on opposite sides of highways have stopped interbreeding. They're becoming genetically distinct after just a few generations of separation. Fragmentation means less genetic diversity. It means inbreeding. It means populations too small to recover from droughts or disease outbreaks. And it means elephants must make choices their ancestors never faced. Cross dangerous roads at night, raid human farms for food, or starve. Every year, approximately 500 people are killed by elephants. Every year, approximately 100 elephants are killed in retaliation by humans. These are not just statistics, they're tragedies on both sides. A farmer in Sri Lanka watches a lifetime of work destroyed in one night as elephants tear through his rice paddy. His children will go hungry. His debt will grow. He has every right to be angry. An elephant mother watches her calf electrocuted by an illegal electric fence someone strung around a field. She trumpets in grief and rage. The next time she encounters humans, she charges. Both are victims of a world that's become too small for coexistence. In India alone, over 100 people and 80 elephants die each year in direct conflict. In Kenya, human population growth in areas bordering national parks has put 2 million people in direct contact with elephant migration routes. Solutions exist, but they require resources, cooperation, and political will. Elephant corridors, protected pathways connecting isolated populations. The Wildlife Trust of India has established 101 identified corridors, but only 35% are adequately protected. Early warning systems, SMS alerts when elephants approach villages, giving farmers time to protect crops without harming elephants. Successful in some regions, but requires cellular infrastructure. Compensation programs. Governments pay farmers for crop damage, removing the economic incentive to kill elephants. Effective where properly funded, but many programs are underfunded or corrupt. Alternative livelihoods. Training farmers in ecotourism or beekeeping, elephants avoid bee colonies, provides income that doesn't depend on agriculture in elephant zones. But none of these solutions address the fundamental problem. There are too many humans needing too much land and not enough space left for giants who need to roam. Elephants have survived climate shifts before. They lived through ice ages. They adapted to the expansion of grasslands. But the pace of modern climate change is unprecedented. Droughts in southern Africa are becoming more severe and more frequent. In 2019 to 2020, over 350 elephants died in Botswana during a drought-linked die-off event. Water sources they'd relied on for generations dried up. In Asia, monsoon patterns are shifting. Elephants time their migrations to rainfall. They know when and where water will appear. But when the rains come early, late, or not at all, that knowledge becomes useless. Climate change also exacerbates human-elephant conflict. When droughts devastate wild vegetation, elephants turn to crops. When floods destroy habitats, elephants move into human areas. And the stress compounds. Elephants already sleep too little. Now they're walking farther for water, competing more intensely for food, dealing with heat stress from rising temperatures. How much more can they endure? Despite the 1989 ivory trade ban, poaching remains a crisis. Between 2010 and 2012, poaching rates spiked dramatically. Over 100,000 elephants were killed in 3 years, one every 15 minutes. Organized crime syndicates, often linked to terrorist groups, used ivory sales to fund operations. Automatic weapons, helicopters, and night vision equipment turned poaching into industrial slaughter. International pressure and increased enforcement brought numbers down. By 2020, poaching deaths had fallen to approximately 20,000 per year. But 20,000 elephants per year is still unsustainable. China's 2017 ban on domestic ivory sales helped. Demand decreased. Prices fell. But illegal markets persist in Laos, Vietnam, and parts of Africa. Organized crime has pivoted to online sales, using encrypted messaging apps and cryptocurrency to evade detection. And now a new threat is emerging: elephants born without tusks. In Gorongosa National Park, Mozambique, 33% of female elephants born after intense poaching during the Civil War, 1977 to 1992, are tuskless. Historically, only 2 to 4% of females were naturally tuskless. Poachers killed every elephant with tusks. The tuskless survived and reproduced. Evolution happened in real time. Human-driven selection for a trait that makes elephants less valuable to criminals. This might seem like a solution, but it's not. Tusks are tools. Elephants use them to dig for water, strip bark, defend themselves. Tuskless elephants are at a disadvantage in the wild. We've changed them, and we don't yet know what it will cost them. Across Africa and Asia, protected areas provide safe havens. Chobe National Park, Botswana, over 130,000 elephants, the largest remaining population. Amboseli National Park, Kenya, long-term research site where families have been studied for 50+ years. Kruger National Park, South Africa, carefully managed population of approximately 17,000. Periyar Wildlife Sanctuary, India, critical Asian elephant habitat in Kerala's Western Ghats. Elephant Nature Park, Thailand, rescue and rehabilitation center for elephants freed from tourism and logging. These places work. Populations are stable or growing. Research continues. Families thrive, but they're not perfect. Overpopulation in fenced parks. When elephants are protected but confined, populations can exceed the land's carrying capacity. In Kruger, managers periodically face the agonizing choice between culling and watching elephants starve. Isolation. Elephants in small reserves can't migrate naturally. Genetic diversity declines. Behavior changes. Fortress conservation. Protecting parks by excluding local communities creates resentment. If locals don't benefit from conservation, they have no incentive to protect elephants outside park boundaries. The future of elephant conservation can't be just about building bigger fences. It has to involve people. Some of the most successful elephant conservation happens when local communities become partners, not obstacles. Namibia's communal conservancies. Local communities manage wildlife on their land. They benefit from tourism revenue. Elephant populations in these areas increased by 78% between 1995 and 2015. Kenya's Wildlife Conservancies Association. Private landowners and communities create protected areas connected to national parks. Elephants can move freely, and landowners earn income from tourism and conservation leases. India's Elephant Task Force works with tribal communities living in forest corridors to reduce conflict and create sustainable livelihoods that coexist with elephants. The principle is simple. If people benefit from living alongside elephants, they'll protect them. If elephants only bring costs, destroyed crops, dangerous encounters, restricted land use, people will view them as enemies. Conservation must serve both elephants and humans. Innovation is providing new ways to protect elephants. GPS collars with satellite communication. Real-time tracking allows rangers to respond immediately if elephants approach poaching hotspots or human settlements. Drones with thermal imaging. Monitor populations, detect poachers at night. Count elephants in dense forest where ground surveys are impossible. AI-powered acoustic monitoring. Microphones in forests detect elephant vocalizations and gunshots, alerting rangers to both elephant locations and potential threats. Genetic analysis. DNA from confiscated ivory can trace it to specific populations, helping prosecute traffickers and identify poaching hotspots. Virtual fences. Elephants quickly learn to associate smartphone-triggered sounds or vibrations with boundaries, reducing the need for physical and dangerous electric fences. Technology alone won't save elephants, but combined with political will, adequate funding, and community involvement, it helps. Safari tourism generates over $12 billion annually in Africa. A single living elephant in Kenya generates approximately $1.6 million in tourism revenue over its lifetime. A dead elephant's ivory is worth $21,000. The economics are clear. Elephants are worth more alive than dead. But ecotourism has complications. COVID-19 demonstrated how fragile tourism-dependent conservation is. When international travel stopped, revenue vanished overnight. Some parks couldn't pay rangers. Poaching increased, and tourism itself can be a stressor. Safari vehicles crowding elephants, flash photography, noise, all disrupt natural behavior. Sustainable ecotourism requires careful management, limited vehicle numbers, minimum distance requirements, revenue sharing with local communities, low-impact practices. Done right, tourism funds conservation and gives communities economic reasons to protect elephants. Done wrong, it becomes exploitation, wearing a conservation mask. Despite everything, poaching, habitat loss, climate change, human conflict, elephants persist. They're adapting. Elephants near roads have learned to avoid peak traffic times. Herds near farms have shifted to more nocturnal patterns to reduce human encounters. Some populations have learned to coexist with villages that respect them, and humans are learning too. Young rangers in Africa, many from communities that historically hunted elephants, now dedicate their lives to protecting them. Scientists from dozens of countries collaborate on elephant research, sharing data, strategies, success stories. Conservation organizations work across borders, recognizing that elephants don't respect human boundaries. Hope doesn't mean certainty. It doesn't mean elephants are safe, but it means the story isn't over. And as long as elephants endure, sleepless, resilient, carrying impossible weight, there's a chance. Ambient sound, the soft rhythm of the herd walking, birds calling, the world moving into full daylight, life continuing. We've walked a long path tonight, through 55 million years of evolution. Through the laboratories where scientists fitted GPS collars and analyzed sleep data. Through the temples where Ganesha stands eternal vigil. Through the battlefields where war elephants carried empires. Through the killing fields where ivory hunters left mountains of bones. And through one single night, with one family, as they moved through darkness toward dawn. We asked a simple question at the beginning: why don't elephants rest? And we found that the answer is not simple at all. They don't rest because evolution made size their survival strategy, and size made rest dangerous. They don't rest because their ecosystems demand constant motion, constant work. They don't rest because memory matters more than dreams, and someone must always remember where the water is. They don't rest because the modern world, our world, has made rest even harder than nature ever did. But perhaps the deepest answer is this: elephants have discovered a different relationship with exhaustion. They've learned to carry it, to walk with it, to function despite it. Not perfectly, not without cost, but with a kind of grace that deserves our attention. If you've stayed awake through this entire journey, you might recognize something familiar. The matriarch who can't rest because she's responsible for others. The herd that keeps moving because stopping feels more dangerous than continuing. The ancient memory systems carrying trauma forward across generations. The exhaustion that never quite lifts, but somehow becomes bearable. These aren't just elephant problems. They're human problems too. We live in a world that asks us to be constantly vigilant, constantly productive, constantly available. Sleep is treated as an indulgence. Rest is something we'll do when things slow down. We carry responsibilities we can't set down. We remember things we wish we could forget. We navigate a landscape that wasn't designed for our well-being. And we wonder why we can't rest. The elephant doesn't solve this, but it does something more valuable. It shows us we're not alone in it. Across the natural world, countless creatures are negotiating the same impossible balance between the need for rest and the demands of survival. And somehow, life continues. Here's what elephants have taught me after walking with them through this long night. Rest is not the absence of burden. Rest is learning to carry burden without losing yourself in it. The matriarch doesn't stop carrying the weight of her family's survival. She just learns to walk with it in a way that doesn't break her. She finds moments, 10 minutes lying in the mud, a pause at the waterhole, the soft rumble of her daughter standing watch, where the burden lightens slightly. Not because it's gone, but because she's not carrying it alone. Perhaps that's what rest actually is. Not stillness, not forgetting, not escape, but rhythm, connection, the knowledge that you can keep moving and still find moments of peace. If your eyes are closing, if sleep is finally finding you, go gently. You've walked far tonight, through history and mythology, through science and story. Let the sound of the savannah carry you forward. Imagine the herd moving through tall grass under stars. The soft footfalls, the rumble of distant thunder, water waiting somewhere ahead. You don't have to solve anything right now. You don't have to carry anything right now. Just rest. The elephants will keep walking. They always do. And when you wake, whenever that is, the world will still be here. Still imperfect, still difficult, still beautiful, just like the elephants showed us. If you're still here, still listening, still thinking, that's okay too. Some nights aren't for sleeping. Some nights are for understanding that sleeplessness doesn't make you broken. The elephant, standing through the darkness, isn't broken either. It's just awake. And in its wakefulness, it's doing something important. It's bearing witness. It's remembering. It's protecting what matters. If that's what your sleeplessness is, the mind refusing to shut down because there are things that matter, then maybe you're not failing at rest. Maybe you're just doing what needs to be done. And tomorrow, or the day after, or someday soon, you'll find your 10 minutes in the mud, your moment at the waterhole, your dawn after a long night. Our matriarch stands in the morning light. She's fed. Her family is safe. The youngest calf is playing again, all traces of last night's terror forgotten. She's been awake for 26 hours. She'll sleep tonight, maybe, for an hour or two. And then she'll wake and do it all again, because that's what giants do. They endure, not because they're invincible, but because they've learned that endurance isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up, and then standing, and standing, until standing becomes its own kind of rest. Thank you for walking with the elephants tonight, for staying through the long journey from ancient origins to modern struggles, for witnessing one family's single night of sleeplessness. Perhaps you found what you came looking for, perhaps not, but you were here. You bore witness. You learned something about giants who never rest. And maybe, in learning about them, you learned something about yourself. That exhaustion can be carried. That memory is both burden and gift. That sleeplessness doesn't mean you're alone. The elephants taught us that. Not through words, but through 55 million years of continuing. Rest with the wild when you can. And when you can't rest, when the night stretches long and sleep won't come, remember, somewhere an elephant is awake too, standing under stars, carrying what must be carried, still here. The night is over, the day has begun, and the giants keep walking.